All right. Welcome back to the channel. We are going to finish today the preview and prediction videos for last year's playoffs teams. We did Michigan, we did Washington, and we did Texas. Today, we are doing the Alabama Crimson Tide prediction video. And I have a special guest today from Ballard Sports Media, Christian Ballard. Ballard, introduce yourself to the channel, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I am working to be a sports journalist. I go to Wallace State in Hanceville, Alabama, and trying to finish up there hopefully by the end of the fall. And, really, I started my channel to kind of put myself out there, get my name out there a little bit. And above all else, I am a big believer in the Lord. And, uh, you know, obviously, like you, as you would know, in case anyone doesn't know, I am also a Alabama fan, but I try to be fair and unbiased with it.
Well, that's the name of the game in terms of journalism. I mean, you can have a favorite team, but ultimately you have to be unbiased, and that's
Yeah,
like
for
everyone
sure.
else on the on this platform, especially with Lou and Pigskin Pete and all them.
Yeah.
All right, before we get into the prediction video, let's talk about. First off, let's recap last year's Alabama, and then take a brief look about what's coming in and what we lost. Alabama last year, 11-1, low loss of the regular season being to Texas. Kind of an unexpected sort of run at the end where we ended up making it to the SEC title game, beat Georgia, ending their undefeated streak, and then made the playoffs. Were you shocked at all last year when we managed to beat Georgia?
I was, and I was even shocked that we won the division. I think going into the season, it really goes back to A-Day last year, where it just looked like the quarterback situation wasn't up to par after Bryce Young left to go, obviously, now with the Carolina Panthers. Jalen Milroe just got better every single week. And, the offense found its chemistry with him every single week. And I feel like it improved throughout the season. I had I I'm sure I'm not the only one. I had LSU beating us for the West going into last year. Jaden Daniels, of course, a Heisman winning quarterback, and um, just everything he was able to do in 2022 to beat Alabama. Uh, you know, I I think Alabama ultimately overachieved, and I know it's weird to say that when they made the college football playoff because they do that on a regular. But that this was a young team, and I think you got to give them credit where it's due.
I mean, credit where credit was due. I mean, a lot of people weren't high on Milrow last year because they knew he could run, but he couldn't. But they don't thought he couldn't throw the ball. And I think when he had to throw the ball, he made it to where he could play in the clutch and ultimately get us to where we wanted to go. Ultimately, we end up going, like I said, 11-1, win the SEC, make it to the playoff. I can't really add much to debate about whether we should have got in or not. That hasn't already been said. Really, both teams had their cases, and the fact that one of them had to be left out showed the weakness of the 14 playoffs, which is why I'm glad we go to 12 teams this year. But anyway, we end up getting in over the undefeated Florida State, lose to the eventual champions, the Michigan Wolverines, and that's basically how the season went last year.
Yeah,
Now, in terms of first, let's cover what we're gaining and what we're keeping from last year. Obviously, the big keep from last year, Jalen Milroe. I think the offense is going to revolve mostly around Jalen Milroe. Not to say we won't have some key pieces in the other parts of the ball. We get Jeremy Bernard, who showed his strengths in the spring game. If you were able to watch that, we have Justice Haynes, who's returning. He's expected to have more of a role in the offense this year. And then on defense, I think the key returner that will have to step up this year because we did lose a lot on defense is going to be Caden Proctor, who's kind of a bizarre story. He transferred out, but then he transferred back in. So he's technically a loss and a gain for Alabama.
Yeah, I think you mentioned him being on the defense. I think he's actually an offensive tackle, but I think it is a big pickup from the portal, and especially considering that he was there last year, and then he left to go back to Iowa. Or I say go back, he actually committed to Iowa before he came to Alabama and flipped. But to get him back on the offensive line is going to be the biggest strength of the offensive line. That's going to help Jalen Milrow out a lot.
Now, in terms of losses, biggest turns in terms of players losses, I would say is probably a two-way tie between Dallas Turner and Kool-Aid McKinstry because they basically spearheaded that defense last year. To lose them kind of puts a hole in the defense that needs to be filled.
I fully agree with you, and I would also say a huge loss, as much as I hate bringing it up, but I think the elephant in the room, pun intended, is Caleb Downs went to Ohio State. So I think that's a huge loss there on the defensive side of the ball. You did mention Dallas Turner. We wish these guys luck where they end up, obviously. I mean, we don't, you know, college kids are going to make their own decisions on where they want to continue their careers. Plus, you got guys going to the NFL. You're very happy about that. Jalen Key was Mr. Irrelevant to the Jets. And there's just so many key pieces that left Alabama on the defensive side of the ball. But when you look at what they have this year in a transfer in Keon Sabb, Damani Jackson is from USC. I mentioned Keon Sabb, he's from Michigan. Deontay Lawson does come back in his redshirt junior year. And I think he, believe it or not, I'm going to make a bold take here that I think he replaces Dallas Turner, and I think he steps up as our big leader on defense.
Well, I mean, we need defensive leadership given what we lost. So to have him there probably will be able to bolster the defense there.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of the ball, we lose Jermaine Burton, wide receiver who had transferred from Georgia a couple years ago, made actually, ironically, a crucial catch against Georgia. We lose Jace McClellan and Roydale Williams, the two running backs from last year. Biggest loss, I would say, from the transfer portal also comes on the offensive side. Isaiah Bond, of course, he made the crucial
Yes.
4th and 31 catch. He made a crucial catch in the SEC title game to put us in position, which I believe ended up leading to the Jermaine Burton catch. But I think the most crucial losses for Alabama this year come not on the field, but in the coaching staff. I'm talking about two key ones from last year. Kevin Steele, he kind of propped up the defense after a few years middling with Pete Golding. And then obviously the biggest loss is a guy who has the case for the greatest college football coach of all time, Nick Saban. He retired a couple days after the national title game. He's replaced by obviously Kalen DeBoer coming in from Washington.
Yeah. And that's the big highlight too is the new head coach, because when you get a new head coach, you get a new atmosphere for Alabama and just kind of this new direction of how they want to go. And the thing, I think the big plus for Kalen DeBoer is that he is an offensive guy. And we saw the offensive struggles last year, but we also saw improvement, especially from Milrow on the back half of the season. And I think the big plus is if they do want to make a run at the playoffs and everything, they're going to have to get that, figured out right away. And honestly, I think they can with Kalen DeBoer. And, it's interesting. I was talking yesterday um, at church with somebody about it, and we said, because the new offensive coordinator, name slips my mind. You can help me out there if you want, but um, we both know that it's going to be Kalen DeBoer running the offense. I mean, you'd be crazy to say otherwise, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd be crazy. It's Nick Sheridan. He's the offensive coordinator, but
That's
it's
right.
like you said, it's basically going to be DeBoer's offense, kind of like how the defense, no matter who the since Nick Saban was primarily a defensive guy, it was pretty much always Nick Saban's defense, with the exception of when Smart was there.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so
But it should be good.
that's the
It should be good.
that's a kind of recap of last year plus what we lose and what we gain. Now let's move into the nitty gritty, which is the schedule for Alabama this year. First game is on the Saturday before Labor Day. It is against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Ballard, I'm pretty sure I know what your prediction is going to be there on this one, but I'm going to ask you first what's your prediction there.
Yeah, no, it's got to be a win. I mean, I think that even though Alabama might drop some games, I don't think this is one of them. And if it is, there's something seriously wrong with Alabama. But I think we'll get a big win. If you're asking for a score prediction, definitely get back with me for sure. Like during the football season, I plan on bringing back my series tidal wave talk where I do predict each game each week. If I had to go with the score prediction right now, though, I think the offense is clicking in that first game for sure. And I think the defense, I think it gets off to a struggle, but I think it still dominates. I would not be surprised if this is like a 45-10 or 55-10 or something like that. But I do think we get the victory in week one.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about a exact score prediction, but in terms of whether or not we win, I think we should be able to dominate. And if we don't dominate, something might be wrong in T Town there. And then the next game against the USF Bulls in Bryant Denny. Now, this is kind of another pun intended elephant in the room kind of thing with this game, because last year when we watched USF versus Alabama, it was 3-3 at the end of the first half, and then Alabama only scored 17 points the entire game, managing to win the game 17-3. What was your real big observances when it came to last year's USF game in terms of how low the score was compared to what we thought it would be?
Well, I think you got to take into account they're coming off a Texas loss in that game. Jalen Milrow struggled mightily against Texas, and I think, believe it or not, like I said, he got better throughout the year. I don't know for sure, but I think the score would have been a little better than 17-3 if Jalen Milrow was in that game. Because remember, Tyler Buckner from Notre Dame, who's back at Notre Dame, uh, he was the quarterback in that matchup because Nick Saban decided to make the switch just because he felt like he needed a little bit of a push for the offense, a little bit of experience. So last year's game kind of wanted me like as a fan, I wanted to pull my hair out. You look at this year's game, though, I think it'd be a little bit different. Now, I'm excited to go to this game with my parents this year. So I'm hoping that we go into this game and it doesn't leave me on the edge of my seat because it's USF. And I got a lot of respect for that program, that team, being from the Tampa area, at least where I grew up and everything. Uh, but again, this should be like the Western Kentucky game. Alabama should go in there and dominate. But maybe USF, maybe they're a good team. Maybe last year wasn't a fluke. Maybe they can compete with Alabama. It's a night game in Tuscaloosa, and we'll just have to wait and see. But I would expect a big win.
Yeah, it's a wait and see kind of situation. And then also something to add on in terms of last year's USF game. I actually went back and watched it again
Yeah.
after we got into the playoffs, and there was a remark made by one of the commentators that kind of encapsulates what I feel about the game. That maybe you don't start Milrow, you want to see what the other quarterbacks did. But once it became clear neither of the other two quarterbacks, Tyler Buckner or Ty Simpson, could have done the job against USF, why not have put Milrow into the game at that point instead of waiting until Ole Miss. I think if he would have done that, we'd have probably gotten at least another touchdown against USF. But I think in terms of this year, I think we should be able to dominate depending on how good the team actually is. Maybe it was an indication of USF being on the rise, but in all likelihood, we should be able to get the dominant win over USF.
I agree fully.
And then following that, we have not only the first road game, but the first Power Five game. It is at Wisconsin. Any real concerns you have about Alabama against Wisconsin?
It's Big Ten on the road, and Big Ten teams are really good. It is Luke Fickle, and we know what he can do. Oh, they've always had good offensive line at Wisconsin. They got really good playmakers over there, but I don't think it'd be enough. I think it'd be enough to give Alabama a scare, and I think that's where the close game comes in at that first part of the season before the bye week. I think a close game at Wisconsin, but Alabama again should get a victory here. But don't be surprised if Wisconsin pulls an upset.
I wouldn't be too surprised if Wisconsin pulls an upset because the big concern for me is not only Big Ten and how physical they are, but the trip across the country. You have to go from the south to the north, the very north of the country. But I watched the bowl game last year against LSU, and nothing really about the bowl game against LSU really screams Wisconsin's going to beat Alabama. So I'm going to go with Alabama beating Wisconsin.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm going with Alabama too, but like I had watched that LSU game. I even watched when I mean, they struggled with Nebraska for crying out loud. They had to take that to overtime, and Nebraska was not not a good team last year. They even struggled. I mean, they lost to Iowa 15-6. Now, Iowa's got some good defense, but if you go back and you look at some of their other losses, like Ohio State, Indiana, Northwestern, even like Wisconsin's got some question mark. I expect them to improve, and maybe they at home can give Alabama a little bit of trouble. That wouldn't surprise me. But Wisconsin's not an inferior opponent for Alabama by no means.
I mean, I do expect them to be improved from last year, but ultimately, I do think we can pull it out against them.
Right.
And then we get our first bye week because the way the calendar fell, there's an extra Saturday within the span of the season. So each team gets an extra bye week right there. And then after the bye week, we get the toughest test of the year, the Georgia Bulldogs. What do you think here?
I really hate to say it. I know it's a night game at Bryant Denny. They were able to beat Georgia at home in 2020, but they also have lost them at home before. But go back to 2007. When they meet in the regular season, it usually goes in Alabama's favor. That's with Nick Saban. This is Kalen DeBoer. And I know I've been tough on Georgia a little bit, and oh, maybe they're not really that great, and Kirby's a decent coach. I take back everything I have said in that, set of like terms ever since they went back to back, and they're recruiting off the charts. They're going to be right back in the playoff. They're going to be one of the 12 teams. They might even win the SEC this year. In fact, I would predict them over Texas for the SEC. But I also say they got to take a loss somewhere. And I don't think it's in Tuscaloosa. I think they go on the road, and you could call it an upset. Maybe Georgia's favored in this game, but
Last I checked, they
still,
were favored by 4.
yeah. I mean, so is it really an upset? But I still consider it tough on the road in the SEC, but it shouldn't be too much. I think it's really close, and I think it's competitive. I don't think Georgia just goes in there and runs away with the game, but they should be able to beat Alabama in this one. If Nick Saban was still the head coach, maybe I would feel differently. But again, it's Kalen DeBoer, and now he's getting into that conference play. And I know he did really well at Washington, but like I said earlier, I said about Kalen DeBoer, I said, look, the SEC is a whole nother level. It's a whole nother step up of competition. There's tough environments. It might be at home, it might be a night game. The crowd might be rocking and it might be sold out. But does he know how to handle Georgia? He probably doesn't at the moment, but we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if an upset occurred, but I got to take the Bulldogs here and I got to give us our first loss.
Yeah, my big concern with the game is that DeBoer in the SEC against probably the toughest opponent he's played in his entire career so far, the Georgia Bulldogs. The only real advantage we have that's not neutralized by something else is the home atmosphere. Other advantages, Georgia also has the bye week going into that game. And I still think there may be some issues we may not have fully worked out because we only played one Power Five opponent. And it was nowhere near as close as or as good as Georgia. So I say we probably take a loss against Georgia, bringing us to 3-1 so far.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Good news, we didn't get to go on. It is on the road, but it's probably the worst home field advantage in the SEC, the Vanderbilt Commodores. I have a feeling I know where you're going to go with this game.
Yeah, big time win for Kalen DeBoer. You could yeah, it'll be his first SEC road game, and maybe the crowd plays a little bit of a factor because I do think Vanderbilt is heading in the right direction with Clark Lee, but at the same time, they're still nowhere near ready to compete with the Crimson Tide, and I expect Alabama to win big there. That should be a afternoon kickoff game. They don't have a channel announced yet, but that should be it should be a pretty good win for Alabama in October.
Yeah, I think we should be able to dominate against Vanderbilt there. Then coming back home, we play South Carolina.
Mm.
Uh, do you or do you not think Shane Beamer's on the hot seat this year?
I do think he's on the hot seat, but I also think his team could improve. I know that's saying a little bit much because I know that he's losing, Spencer Rattler and all that, but I I don't know. I'm on the higher side than I am the lower side for South Carolina, but I'm not going to say one of their wins is at Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's an afternoon kickoff game. Maybe Alabama gets off to a slow start in this game, and South Carolina gives them a little bit of trouble, but for the most part, they should win.
Yeah, I also think we'll be able to get a win over South Carolina. My thoughts on Shane Beamer, maybe he's not on the hot seat this year, but if they don't do good this year, then next year he's definitely on the probably the biggest hot seat in the entire SEC. I'm a little bit higher on South Carolina than a lot of YouTubers are, but I also think with their schedule, they're not going to exactly set the SEC on fire. And I think Alabama should be able to dominate.
For
Then we
sure.
get
I fully agree.
to probably the toughest stretch of games. Not necessarily Georgia's easily the toughest, but we're going to be in a stretch of one tough game, another possible tough game, a bye week, and then the toughest environment we'll have to play. Starting off at Tennessee in Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. What are your thoughts?
Mm, they did beat us 2 years ago. They competed okay at home last year. Now we got to go to Neyland. I almost wanted to make the trip out there this year, but I settled for two home games for Alabama. But I really would like to go to Knoxville sometime and check it out. I think I will definitely add that to my bucket list. But for this game, we don't know what time it's going to be at. It could be a night game, it could be afternoon, but I'm sure it's going to be rocking in Knoxville. And I expect a close game like we had in 2022. And I know we can make all the jokes in the world about, Alabama owning Tennessee outside of 2022 and everything. But again, new head coach. I don't know if he's going to know what he's getting into in some of these rivalries. Uh, Give me a loss for Alabama here in Knoxville going on the road, but keep it close. I think this could be one of the better offensive games for Alabama. I do think Tennessee has some secondary issues, But I also think defensively for Alabama, it could be their toughest challenge with Nico at quarterback against them.
Yeah, my big concern about the game is that not only the atmosphere, but also Nico being the unknown at this point. We only seen him in one game so far. If you buy into the hype of the Tennessee fans, then they're going to go 12-0. Nico's going to win the Heisman and all that. I don't think he's exactly that great. I do think he's going to be good. I do think it's a close game, but I do think that Alabama's probably going to pull it off in the clutch in Neyland Stadium. I think we can get the win over Tennessee this year. So I have them
Okay.
as a win for Alabama. So far in the schedule, let me pull it back up. I have them going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have them at 6-1 with their lone loss being the Georgia. You have them at 5-2 with losses to Georgia and Tennessee.
Yeah, and again, it wouldn't surprise me if they get at least one of those teams, or maybe both. I really think that it's unknown, and maybe they're out to Lank this year. Let all naysayers know. That is very possible. But if I'm going with my gut, new head coach and what we've seen in history with Alabama, it's not impossible to pick up those wins and pull some upsets, but I'm just going with my gut saying that Georgia's going to be better and Tennessee on the road. If it were at home, I'd give it to Bama, but I'm going to give Tennessee the win on the road.
Then after that, we have to go back to home, and it'll be homecoming against the Missouri Tigers. Missouri might have been the most shocking team in the SEC last year. I thought they were going to have another close to 500 season. They almost won the East.
They almost did, and you know Eli Drinkwitz is on a roll. He's going to continue to have success with Missouri, I think, and I think he's going to be there for quite a while until someone probably comes and steals him. I don't know. I don't know how he is as far as no, Missouri's home to me. Yeah, the money's going to call your name. But as long as they have him, they should be a really good team. But I don't think they're going to be enough to go on homecoming in Tuscaloosa and get a win. I think Alabama takes the loss to Tennessee, but they bounce back against Missouri.
Yeah, the Missouri game were in Missouri. I would have said Missouri gets the win, but with it being at Bryant-Denny Stadium on homecoming, could be a night game. FB schedules has it as falling somewhere between 3:30 and 8 p.m. That's probably going to depend on how good the two teams are. I think Alabama can get the win regardless of the time slot, though, in Bryant-Denny. Look for a close game, but I think we get it.
Yeah,
And
for
then
sure.
bye week number 2, followed by what I think is a game is. I think this is probably the worst stadium if you're the visiting team to go to. It's at LSU. I'm gonna let you give your thoughts
Mhm.
first, and then I'll give mine.
It's a tough stadium to go into, but you got to think back before 2022 when Alabama lost in overtime with Mason Taylor caught the ball for the Tigers. Outside of that, Alabama's been able to go in there and dominate that stadium. They've shut out LSU. They've won in overtime. They've hit last second like field goals and stuff like that. So they've been able to go in there and dominate that stadium and not let the crowd affect them. I don't. Jalen Milroe going on the road there. We'll see. It will be his first time at Tiger Stadium. I think LSU plays it close, but I'm gonna right now. My gut says Alabama could get it done. I think we could get it done. I'm not sold on LSU's defense. I also want to see what the quarterback situation looks like now that Jaden Daniels is in the NFL. So I have some questions for the Tigers right now. And until they're answered, I'm not picking them against Alabama this year on November 9th.
All right, so you have them as a win.
Mhm.
Looking at LSU this year, they did lose Jaden Daniels. The presumptive starter is probably Garrett Nussmeier. although we would have to see for
Yeah.
sure because there's been instances where we thought we knew LSU starter, but then a different starter is appointed. Who's that receiver they lost again? Was it Malik Neighbors? I think it was Malik Neighbors they lost. But other than that, I do think their
That
offense is
sounds like
probably.
it. Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
than that, I do think their offense is probably going to be good. Nussmeier might be a better passer than Daniels. Obviously, he can't run as much, but if LSU's got a good running back, then that could be negated there. Their defense, just like you, I think LSU's biggest concern is defense. However, they are overhauling the staff, so maybe they get better with defense. How much better? We'll have to wait and see until the season. Tiger Stadium, to me, it's the rocking environment. The last time we were there, we probably should have won, but we made too many crucial mistakes, lost the game. I wish I could pick it in the other direction, but I think LSU is going to pull the upset in Tiger Stadium against
Okay.
Alabama in Baton Rouge.
Yeah. Okay.
So at this point, we both have Alabama with 2 losses. One of them from both of us comes from Georgia, but you think the other loss is coming from Tennessee. I think the other loss is coming from LSU. Then the next week, we go
Yeah.
back to Bryant-Denny Stadium against the Mercer Bears. Oh boy, I think we can blow them out easily. Do
Whoa.
you?
No, this game worries me, man. The toughest game on the schedule. Yeah, we're gonna blow them out. Give me a win. I'm not worried.
Then we go to the SEC. One of the 2 SEC newcomers. One of them's Texas. The other's Oklahoma at Norman, Oklahoma. What's your thoughts?
Hmm. I had this as a loss earlier when I did the preview. Or at, well, I think when I did Oklahoma, because Kalen DeBoer had already come in. I said, new head coach. I have a gut feeling Oklahoma. They keep it close, but I think Oklahoma could get them there. I really do. I think it's not, being at the what is this? The Gaylord family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. Anyway,
Say
going
that
to
5 times
Norman,
fast.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, I I see Oklahoma getting it done. I think that Brent Venables is doing some big things with the defense, getting it prepped up, getting it ready, and they've always had good quarterback play. I know Dylan Gabriel is now at Oregon replacing Bo Nix, but I think he's got some good weapons out there. I think that, you know, they're always going to have good offense somehow or another. Uh, maybe my mind changes on this game at the beginning of the season if Oklahoma can't figure out what to do in the SEC. But for a young Alabama team and a young coach going to Norman is going to be a challenge. So give me the Sooners here.
Yeah, I do think going to a stadium we haven't gone to before, kind of like with the Wisconsin game, could throw off Bama. I also think Oklahoma is a little bit more talented, but also I'm concerned for Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold. We didn't really see anything spectacular from him in the bowl game. And also, I have concerns about Brent Venables. No doubt in my mind, he's an amazing defensive coordinator, but we have yet to see that defensive magic at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley didn't really have an emphasis on defense at Oklahoma. Everybody thought when Venables came in and he's a defensive centered coach that it would improve Oklahoma's defense. We have yet to see it. Now, maybe in year 3 he does. We do see that, but until we actually see Oklahoma perform at a high level on defense, and considering how good we think Alabama's offense is going to be, I don't see Oklahoma being able to pull it out late in the season. Now, maybe if they were like fighting for their bowl rights, then maybe I could see them sneaking them there. But I do think Alabama is actually going to get the win over Oklahoma in Oklahoma. And then the last one,
Okay.
and then the last one is the one we look forward to every year as Alabama fans. And I think the other team looks just as forward to it as us. Auburn, this year in Tuscaloosa. Now, Ballard, quick pop quiz. When was the last time Auburn beat Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium?
You got to go back to 2010 for the comeback game. They won the championship that year. Gene Chizik was the head coach. What more do you want to know?
Yeah, Auburn. Auburn 2010 reminded me a lot, or I should say, in retrospect, reminds me a lot of 2019 LSU. Once in a generation quarterback, once in a generation roster, led by a not so good head coach. But
Right.
now, flash forward to 2024, we did struggle against them last year, but that was in Jordan Hare, and we get the most suspect outcomes in Jordan Hare for some reason because the crowd is just so rocking there. But with it being in Tuscaloosa, I think it changes a lot. What do you think?
Well, I think you have to look at it as, does Kalen DeBoer know what he's getting into with this rivalry? And I think that's a legitimate question because you could say, "Oh, I've heard about the Iron Bowl. Yeah, it's the biggest rivalry in the SEC. It's the biggest one in Alabama. It's the biggest one in college football." You could say that all you want to, man. I don't care where it's played. Anything's possible. I mean, it was only 11 points 10 years ago at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I mean, Auburn kept it close. So they can go in there and give them a game. They can give Alabama some trouble, I think. But I do think Alabama's a better team. I think they get the win. I don't think we need any 4th and 31 magic. I think it might be close towards the end, but Alabama could put some extra points on the board with the field goal or a late touchdown to really seal the game. And by the way, I look forward to going to this game this year with my mother. I got her tickets for Mother's Day.
Yeah, I have the same sentiment too. That's something I actually didn't think about until now is how does the board adjust to the rivalry and does he know what he's getting himself to? That's kind of like that new Michigan head. Well, he's been there, but he never has a head coach. Does he know what he's getting to with the Ohio State rivalry?
Mhm.
But I do think we can
I
pull
don't
it
know.
out probably by like I have it by like a low 3 score matchup. The Auburn game, I think we managed to get the win there in Bryant-Denny over
Yeah.
Auburn. So there you have it. Ballard predicts Alabama to go 9-3, losses being
Mhm.
to Georgia, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. I have Alabama at 10-2, also with a loss to Georgia, but with the second loss being against LSU. Now, Ballard, I'm gonna ask you this question, and then I'll answer the question I have about your predictions. Do you think a 10-2 Alabama team would get into the playoff at the 12 team playoff?
Absolutely. I think they have a tough schedule. I think they would have the wins to back up the 2 losses. And if a 10-2 Alabama is not one of the 12 best teams, I think there's something wrong with the committee, honestly. And I'm not even saying that out of bias or hate. I'm just saying, like, how many times have we seen a 10-2 team not be knocking on the door of a playoff, but they finish in the top 10 and they're still on the outside looking in? Like they've come close. And we've even seen 10-2 teams that end up winning their conference and they get left out. Alabama, think about it, man. Like they could they could lose 2 games and still like have the wins to back it up. As long as you have the ranked wins, like you got to hope that you beat like a ranked Wisconsin or a ranked LSU or whoever, and then drop like Georgia and Tennessee, but keep them close. Don't let them be blowouts. Maybe they could get in with 2 losses.
Yeah, I think if you're in the SEC and you go 10-2, as long as the loss was against like number 1 ranked Georgia or a 16th ranked Tennessee or a 12th ranked LSU, I think you get in with 2 losses. Now,
Mhm.
now I'm going to answer the question I'm proposing about a 9-3 Alabama. That one would be slightly harder, not impossible, but it would depend on who who they're putting in consideration for the other 12th team is. If it's a 10-2 ACC team or a 10-2 Big 12 team that didn't really have a major win, I could see a 9-3 Alabama getting in. But if it's against a 10-2 Big 10 team or another another 10-2 SEC team, then I see Alabama getting left out.
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. I think 10 wins at minimum, it should be the goal if they want to make a college football playoff.
And 10-2 in a playoff, get in the playoff, even if we get blown out in the first round, I think that's a success for DeBoer, being that he is coming into Alabama, taking over possibly the greatest and going into the toughest conference.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you, Ballard, for joining me on this prediction video. That rounds out the top 4 teams from last year. I'm going to start doing the rest of the top 20, but I'm not going to have them in a particular order. Next one is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. Until then, subscribe to Ballard's channel. I'm going to put a link in the description. So if you're coming here and you're not subscribed to Ballard's channel, subscribe to him. And of course, subscribe to Roll Tide 99. Until then, this is Roll Tide 99. And for myself and Ballard, I say thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all later. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Thank you.